Welcome back into another episode of Making the Leap. We're so glad you're here with us today. I'm looking forward to talking today, bringing you guys information about a guest, a mom that we have on today named Nicole Solas. I really am looking forward to this conversation and sharing a little bit of what she has to say with an audience on multiple levels today.
Yeah, and this is a heavy week.
Yeah.
Before we get into our guest today, we felt it was something that we should address here on Making the Leap because it not only is it another sad, tragic story of a school shooting this week, but very specifically, it was a Christian school. Mm-hmm. And that really, in particular, stung here at the Herzog Foundation and all of us who put together Making the Leap. And so we felt we really ought to address it and maybe talk through it a little bit. I think the thing that I would just start by saying is that when you're called to be the salt and light, you're going to come up against some Herculean darkness. And I think that's, God bless these little children. It sounds to me now like the reports are the administrator who was killed, the headmaster of the school. It sounds like she was quite literally running toward this person. The law enforcement who just gave a press briefing at the time of this recording of this podcast said that it sounds like she was actually running toward the shooter. So you're just mindful that when you are in this space, when you're trying to tell the truth, when you're trying to advance the kingdom, you're going to come up against hell. You're going to come up against dark forces that would like you to not succeed. And that's just what kind of sat with me today when I heard this news.
No, it's I think the other piece of it that was sticking with me a lot, I just kept praying. I'm so prayerful and hopeful that there is a community that is going to come around these families, which I think is the other piece of what we talk about a lot with Christian schools, school communities, not just Christian schools, public schools, any school. You pray that there is a community support, and I believe that there is with this. But these are the experiences when the events when you read about them that it's overwhelming, and it's like you said, it's heavy, but it is evil, and I always want to be calling it out as evil. These shooters, when they come in, it is Satan working through them to attack what is true and right.
Yep.
No matter what the scenario. And my heart breaks, and we're so sorry.
Yeah, and this school was very specifically targeted. We have every reason to believe. I think we're going to learn more. Maybe by the time you listen to this, we'll know more. At this time, we don't know, but we do know that this is a person who actually attended this school once. And
I will say these hit home for me. We talk about this all the time, you and I privately, being a former teacher and running the drills and all the safety measures and everything that we had to do as educators because of evil that exists in the world. And the story of a headmaster or principal, whatever her actual title was, blew me away. And that was a lot.
I will not, as I said on my radio show, I will not fall prey to making this personally about a gun story, because it's certainly not a gun story. It's about an evil. It's about a darkness, and it's about mental illness, and it's about targeting innocent people and good people of faith, staring down the face of evil and darkness and mental illness, and for anyone to miss that and call this a gun story or what do we do to fortify our schools kind of a story, I don't accept that argument. I don't accept that argument. What I accept is Satan is real, darkness is real, and those of us who are trying to tell truths and do good in this world are going to face that, and it's going to continue to be something that we will face, particularly as Christians. It just is, and it's tough, and it's sad. The one thing I do know, and it did bring me great comfort, is to see some of the parents and that community of believers. If something this awful is going to happen, it does bring you comfort to know that it's to a community of believers who will have one another's backs and who will not be dissuaded and will not be silenced and will not go away or hide or shrink. or hide that light under a basket. They're going to put it on a lampstand. Our work, the work of advancing the kingdom of Christ, will not be defeated, and we will not shrink in the face of evil. We will continue to rise up and tell the truth, and we will continue to advance his kingdom through Christian education, we hope. And we hope those of you that listen share that point of view. I know many of you do. I know so many thousands of parents all over the country are working hard because they share that same point of view to advance the kingdom. You're going to hear from a woman today who's decided to stand up and be counted, not because she wanted to be, but she found herself inadvertently in a place where she felt she had to. And her story is really quite inspiring. It kind of dragged her along. Sometimes we're dragged along.
Right.
But the time for choosing, the time to stand up and be counted, it's not getting any easier. It's not shrinking away or not standing up and being counted. Not making a decision for yourself and your family is no longer an option. Maybe 10 years ago, you could say, well, I'm going to sit this out. And Lord knows we did. Well, I don't know. That sounds a little much. I feel like we're at a point.
We sat out. We just.
Well, I just mean we're at a point now where we don't have the luxury of saying, well, that's fine for them.
I
maybe
think
not
that's
us.
more of it. People are starting to say that.
We can't. No one can afford to be passive anymore. You can accept it and say it's fine.
Or I choose not to do anything about it.
Yeah.
I think you can do that.
But it's a time for choosing. And there's a bright line of distinction and demarcation between those of us who are going to tolerate this and those of us who are going to actively move to do something about it. And that's what you're going to hear today in our guest.
Absolutely. And to that end, when you talk about community, that is something that we want to celebrate as well. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of our podcast, and we couldn't do it without listeners sending emails and giving reviews and talking with us. And
this is gonna be fun.
We want to celebrate with people.
This will be a party, and we're like a month out. As of this podcast,
almost
post?
Less than actually.
So here's the thing: it's a free party. If you're a listener, I suppose if you wanted to, you could come from out of town. You'd have to be a pretty hardcore listener.
But we have a cool airport, I guess.
We do have a new airport.
From all reports that I hear.
If you're a listener to this podcast, this is a free event. You do have to register for it.
Yes,
though.
so you can go online. Go on to the Herzog Foundation website, and you can register there. It's April 24th. It starts, doors open at 5:30.
We're going to do a live version of this show.
Talking
with a live
audience members, talking with parents, talking with teachers, talking with community members, that kind of thing, and just bringing people together truly in celebration. I think I would not say it is a school choice rally. I would not say it's not anything like that. I really do think it's about us saying thank you to you. I think it's about you. Maybe this is something you're still kind of thinking about. This might be a great time to come in and listen and
with
really
food,
hear
free
with
food
people.
And drinks.
Talk with
free
people,
grub.
Hear them, listen, share stories, and just kind of celebrate, because as we're seeing all over, we need these kinds of communities in existence because we are combating craziness all around us.
This is
and
a
I think
super
it's important.
limited space too.
Yes,
So it's important that if you hear this and you go, "Oh, that sounds fun. I'd like to register."
Go ahead and register.
Please register, because we won't have a ton of space. So if you can come, like I said, free food, free drink, bring kids. It's kid friendly.
Absolutely.
But limited in space, and we'd love to include you and your story in the show. So that'll be our first live show to celebrate a year of doing this now.
Yes, I know. It's amazing, right? Hard to believe. We are so excited to welcome in Nicole Solas, a mom out of Rhode Island. And possibly, if you're following any news, I know some people try to avoid it, some people watch it, you might have seen her popping up on Twitter, popping up on YouTube with some of the different exchanges. Fox News.
A mama bear out of Rhode Island. And by the way, this might be, other than Sean Spicer, who was the former White House press secretary, this marks the first conversation I've ever had with anyone from Rhode Island.
I know. I think so, too.
You're first. never met a Rhode Islander until our guest.
So welcome in, Nicole. We're so glad to have you today.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
You are a busy person. You have been all over the place. First I wanted to start before we even go into kind of what's been happening. Have you? You are with the Independent Women's Forum. That's correct, I believe.
Yeah, yep. They took me on as a senior fellow shortly after I was sued by the teachers union.
Okay, so that is one of the questions I had, was that if you were you, I guess, active politically or within any kind of school environment before all this happened, or is this kind of all a new thing?
Oh God, no. I was almost apolitical. I mean, I couldn't tell you who my representative was, which I'm kind of embarrassed to say now, but I'm always trying to emphasize that, I was not a politically active person. This all happened because my school district retaliated against me. And I felt like I had to make a public response to defend myself and, preserve the reputation of my family. I was just a stay-at-home mom, taking care of my kids, enrolling my daughter in school. I mean, the thing I was into was like gardening. I mean, I was just like not involved with anything politically. I don't have a political history. I don't even have like political family members. And I wanted to know what my kindergartner was learning in school. So I called the principal, and they told me, that they don't call kids boys and girls, that they embed the values of gender ideology into the classroom at every grade, including kindergarten. And when I started asking more questions, they stonewalled me and told me that I had to submit public records requests to get all of my questions answered. And even if I wanted to see the curriculum, I had to submit a public records request, even though by law in Rhode Island, the curriculum is supposed to be available in a school building, and I'm supposed to be able to just walk in and look at it. And they wouldn't let me do that either. I asked for a tour of the school. They told me they weren't giving tours, even though I found out later they were giving tours to other people. So they really treated me like an enemy right out of the gate. And to retaliate against me for submitting public records requests, because that's what they told me to do, they put my name on an agenda of a school board meeting and then had a whole big public meeting all about me. They talked about me like I was this terrible person. They called me racist. They tried to ostracize me from the community, and it was truly like a show trial. And when I fought back by exposing them in the media for what they were doing to me, they decided not to sue me. And then the teachers union, a couple months later, did step in, and the teachers union filed a lawsuit against me for submitting the same public records request, asking questions like they told me to. And I've been in litigation with them for almost 2 years, and I still don't have answers to my public records
Nicole,
request.
I want to establish a couple of things very quickly for the audience, because I think, I'll just be honest with you, when people hear a story like yours, I think they assume, oh, okay, Nicole is one of these people who has been loud and vocal and active and a thorn in these people's sides for a long time. There's got to be more to this story. She's not just a mom who's been quiet and then one day started asking questions and the full weight of the district came piling down on her. There's got to be more to this, is what I suspect some people are thinking. So I just want to address this right away. To be clear, you have never had any kind of political activity or interaction to this point with the school, or inquiries prior to this point.
That is correct. This is my first child that I enrolled in kindergarten. I've never enrolled in public school. And they exactly what you said, they came down on me with the full weight of the monolith of public education. And I have the receipts to prove it. Through my public records request, I found an email from the superintendent panicking, saying, oh my goodness, this mom named Nicole Solas is asking all these questions and it threatens our equity work. So
how big is how big is the school? I'm sorry to press on this, but I just think the specifics are interested. How big is this district? How big is the class where your child would have been enrolled?
I mean, I think she would have had maybe 15 kids in her classroom. I'm not sure, because I couldn't get answers even to just normal questions.
The reason I ask is how, the size of this district. Like, I'm trying to get a sense of, have these people never been challenged? You're the first mother to ever rise up and say, hey, I don't agree with what's going on here?
I wish I could know if other people were retaliated against, but I wasn't paying attention until I enrolled my kid in school. So I didn't really know a lot about them. All I knew is that they were becoming radicalized, because when George Floyd died, they released something called a message of solidarity written by the school, saying that they stand with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and they want to eradicate disparities. And they are a systemically racist school district, and they're going to eradicate racism. And so I knew that they were doing political stuff. And when I asked questions about what exactly they were doing, then they didn't want to answer them. And in this email that I found, the superintendent said that they were going to funnel all of my questions into public records requests. And that was a way that they were saying that they were going to stonewall my questions.
It is fascinating.
They really did do that.
Well, it's really interesting, because we came across some of that as well in our former district that we were in, with parents that were basically, like you said, stonewalled into things and really having to work put in a huge amount of effort to try to get just some basic information. And I'm actually going back to what you said about the curriculum. Like, as you were saying that, you had to submit these requests for curriculum, in my head, I was like, no, you don't. You should not have to do that. But of course, I mean, I know you know that, but that's one of the first things that I tell parents, like when they're questioning, when they're not sure what they want to do with education, I'm like, well, take a look at the curriculum. It is obviously it's on state websites, but then it changes. Schools have autonomy within that. So I'm like, no, just go look at the curriculum. And I can't even believe that that's the first step that they're taking. And then to go from a school board situation to a teacher union situation, that is a giant jump.
Yeah. Another wrinkle here is that I found out later that my school didn't even have curriculum. This was told to me by another parent who asked for it, and they were told straight that they just don't have curriculum and teachers just teach whatever they want. There's no way to guarantee a quality uniform education, of a student at one school versus another. But for me, they didn't tell me the truth. Instead, they sent me on a wild goose chase. And you can go to their website right now and you can see on their website, it says that they do not have codified uniform curriculum after 2014, meaning they do not have current curriculum for almost the past 10 years.
What school district is this again, Nicole? Just so people know, where are you talking about?
This is South Kingstown School District in Rhode Island. And, after they, had this huge show trial of me for submitting all these public records requests, 4 months later, I sent them an email just asking, hey, can you just tell me, are boys allowed in the girls' bathroom? I emailed that to the school attorney. And what was her response to me? Her response was to submit another public records request to get that information. So after they sued me, after they, made me an enemy of the state for doing all that, they are still telling me to submit public records requests if I have any questions.
Well, then there's obviously a lot going on, I think, administratively. I would guess. Like, that's what I think a lot of this is exposing, is there's a lot of administrative type issues
and
happening.
We've not met before, Nicole, so no. I'm taking you at face value. I'm not calling you out as being untruthful, so we have to operate under the assumption, not having met you before, that you're telling us everything that we need to know. And having said that, based on that, what is your read on this? You're a new mother entering your first child into this school, and you're treated this way, and you say you're apolitical. This is sort of, I would assume you're kind of shocked and dumbfounded by it. And look, I think there are a lot of people who just aren't particularly political, and that's okay. I happen to be very political. It's my job. But so I don't come at this in a judgmental way when I ask, what does a completely apolitical person think when they hit a wall like this of things that they don't agree with? What does it make you think? What were you feeling as a mother who had not been enmeshed in politics prior?
Oh, I mean, I registered as a Republican shortly thereafter, and I became very involved in politics because I had no idea everything that I was missing. I mean, I was politically aware. I understood the issues that were going on, but I've never taken action on anything. And this is something that made me realize that I was like asleep behind the wheel this whole time, that my town could have done this to me and my family. It was really to ruin my life, to ostracize me and my children before we even had a chance to participate in the community. And this is something that activates someone like me. I had no interest in politics, and now it's become my whole life.
Well, I commend you on this, because I come across a lot of moms, obviously just by nature of what I'm doing, and I talk with a lot of people. And when it comes, exactly what you just said, when it comes to some of this, when they consider themselves to be apolitical, they just think that everything is too big and they can't wrap their heads around it, and it's just too much. Like, I can't tell you how many times I have heard verbatim, just, no, I can't even get involved. I can't bother with that. It's too much. And I frankly don't feel smart enough to handle any of it. And I really commend you for going the opposite direction. And that's not to slam someone who says, you know what, I don't want to be involved, but to step into this the way that you have. I can't even imagine how overwhelming that would be. I've been, by nature of what, Chris does, and by nature of being a mom with kids and just feeling kind of impassioned about some things as well, I've been around this for a while. For you to come in cold like this and just to kind of have that inkling of like, I just want to ask some questions, I just want to know, and then to have it explode, that has, number one, I'm impressed and I'm amazed and I'm thankful for parents like you, but I'm also like, that's got to be a toll. That has got to take such a toll on who you are, kind of what you believe.
It sounds lonely too, like you were treated like an invasive species. Typically when you hear about stories like this, Nicole, it's at least 2 or 3 parents joining forces together. You sound like what blows me away about this story is it sounds like these people, like they hit an alarm. We have an invader. Like,
right. And what have they been doing up until this point?
Like you're the one person in the entire community that's ever addressed this before? It's kind of overwhelming to me to hear you tell me this.
Well, I mean, I think I'm the one person in the whole community that found a way to make them answer questions. I think people are used to emailing questions to your school board and they just don't respond to you and then you just give up. People are used to doing public comment and they just, say, oh, if you missed or up a bye, nothing happens. And by submitting public records requests, at their direction, you have found a way to make them legally required to answer you. And that's really what political power is all about.
That's very
making
true.
someone do what you say. And it's their fault. They stepped on this rate. I didn't even know that my school district accepted public records requests because I wasn't involved. So they told me to do this and it backfired on them. And, the reason why I stepped into this is because it was more overwhelming to watch my school district hold me under their thumb. If you think about how far you've come in life. I'm so happy to have just a healthy family, be able to afford a house. My kids are healthy and beautiful. And then this happens, and I'm like, I didn't come this far in life to be under the thumb of a school board that's going to try to ruin my life. And so for me, the stakes were really high. They made this personal. This wasn't just a public records request dispute. This was them trying to ruin my life, and I felt like I had no choice. And
so you're involved in litigation with them, current ongoing. Like this is now you're turning around and you're suing them.
Well, so I have two lawsuits. The first one is the teachers union sued me for submitting these requests. The basis of that lawsuit is they're saying that if the school releases public information, because there are all these lies on social media saying that, I asked for like social security numbers or something like private information, which I didn't.
No.
And even if you do ask for private information, like a lot of people submit public records requests and they just don't know what is public versus what is not public. All the school has to do is deny the request. They send you a letter saying, sorry, that's not released, that we can't release that under public records law.
Right.
But what the teachers union is arguing is that if we release public information, then the teachers at school are at risk of being harassed by national conservative groups. So it's the same leftist playbook, saying all this hysteria about harassment in order to suppress your speech. So that's the main lawsuit. And then I also filed a lawsuit against my school, the Goldwater Institute, or my attorneys, because they kept me out of public meetings that were discussing critical race theory, and it would revolutionize the way that they taught education. And I have everything in writing saying I want to come, and they told me you can't come. So that's another lawsuit I have with them.
Please tell me that since you've walked this plank and done all this fighting, please tell me there are at least a couple of other people with a pulse in your community who've joined your side here. Tell me, please.
Yeah, not only do I have more friends than I ever had in my life. I have people all over Rhode Island that they send me tips every day. There are teachers, so many wonderful, good teachers in Rhode Island that are on my side. They reach out to me saying, hey, this is what's going on in school. And then I work with them to try to expose it. And the whole point of exposing it in the media is to apply political pressure to say that you can't indoctrinate our kids and, brainwash them with gender ideology or tell them that America's racist. So it has, ended up being an experience where my community grew. And that's really the best revenge here, because they retaliated against me because they wanted to isolate me. And all it did was open me up to a wonderful new community.
Are you hopeful at reform? Or do you feel like this is I've heard some say that this is just too big and it's insurmountable. The snowball's already well downhill and gained too much momentum to stop. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think the only thing that can reform public school is school choice, because once people have their money back in their hands and they can bring it to a school that reflects their values, it will cause public school to have to compete, and they will have to reform if they want to survive. You always hear that myth of, school choice defunds public school. Well, it won't defund them if they improve. If they have to actually compete, that's what happens in every marketplace.
Right.
So I think that is the only way that we can save both public school and save our kids from indoctrination, is with school choice.
And if you don't mind my asking, just out of curiosity, as I did not see this, I was reading some articles and I was watching some of the clips online. I didn't hear this, and I apologize. What did you end up deciding to do with your daughter for kindergarten then?
Oh, well, I removed her from school and we enrolled in a Catholic school. It was a wonderful blessing in disguise. And it was around the time that my school hired a PR firm to smear me in the national media that I realized they were truly psychotic, and I just didn't feel safe at public school. I didn't even want to enroll her and continue this fight. I thought that, all their talk of like being safe in public school. I was like, wow, I don't feel safe.
That's,
so we're leaving.
No, and safety is such a huge component of everything right now.
Yeah, that's tax dollars well spent, by the way. I'm sure the community loves that their tax money was spent to bring in a smear merchant.
I can't even imagine being a parent in that district, watching this happen and thinking, is this what we're doing with our time and our money? It's obnoxious. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that you entered this probably Catholic school, if I'm guessing, wasn't really even on your radar when you started this. And yet for you to call it a blessing in disguise, I think speaks to a lot of what Chris and I talk about, which is just offering continued information to parents about all the choices that exist, because I think they're a lot like you. They just don't know that they even need to have a second option.
It feels sometimes like God continues to expose us to some ugliness sometimes. Right. So we got to walk through a bit of fire to understand that there are options. Sometimes it has to get a little hotter before we jump out of the fire, it seems sometimes.
Yeah, that's hard. I can't even. I commend you for that as well, because I think it could have been easy for you to just kind of roll over and, be like, okay, I'm sorry, too much work, this is hard. But you are fighting back, and you've pulled your daughter. And I assume probably going forward, your son will go along the same lines.
Yes, absolutely. We didn't plan for private school financially, and we're definitely making sacrifices. And, I didn't even grow up with a religion. And so Catholic school for us is more like a shelter from the storm. But it beyond that, I almost didn't realize how much my daughter, who's in first grade now, really needed a spiritual component to her education. So I'm really happy to be where I am now, even though it was really hard.
That just warms my heart. I'm going to, if you don't mind, I wanted to ask you one more personal question, just based on what you said. Do you feel like it's also increasing your spirituality a little bit, or does it just focus more on your daughter? And no judgment either way. I'm just curious on your response to that.
Yeah. And, I don't really talk about this a lot because there's so much, hatred toward Christians. And the people in my life that I know are Christian are the kindest, most loving and accepting people. And I know anyone can call themselves a Christian and be a good Christian, but I don't know those people. And it really opens me up to, the values of Christianity and Catholicism. And I think everyone should be more open to it in a world that we have now.
Nicole, I thank you so much for sharing what you did today. I think also a mom who kind of struggled with, what the decisions were to be for her own kids and that kind of thing, and pushing back against school boards and seeing what was happening with parents. I think we need more people like you that are, I think not afraid to do the hard things in multiple respects. I think you're doing them across the board. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on with us and share just a little bit. I think this is a dipping a toe in the water of what's going on with this story, but I'm super grateful you shared with us today.
And the vulnerability and the honesty. Yeah. It's tough to be honest and say the things you said. So we're very, very grateful for your testimony, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, that was a lot of wow.
You know what? She sounded a lot like you. That was probably, in terms of stories that we've heard, I think hers might be closest to yours in terms of all the shows we've done. I think she had a very similar trajectory through life as you did. Is that?
I think in some ways probably fair. I will say I absolutely am not good at taking the incoming. I still struggle. Sometimes I'm like, I'm fine with it. I'm fine. But then sometimes I'm like, no, I'm just going to hide under my my comfortable little home and just kind of tuck my head. But when she was talking about those requests for information, oh my goodness, that took me back. I was having a lot of deja vu, because that's when it was, if you remember, that's when things were really coming to light about what our own school administration and school boards, what they were doing and the communication they were having behind the scenes. And it was all those requests for information emails that were coming out.
Yeah.
It was mind-blowing.
If your school board's reaction to your request for information is anything less than, but of course, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so
100%.
Here, if it's anything less than that, you've got a massive problem.
Right. And the other thing, I just thought, to be alone in that, the only reason I think I felt comfortable in having the conversations I was having is because I knew instantly I wasn't alone. And I think she started out feeling kind of like,
sounded lonely.
this is me. Like, here I am by myself doing this thing.
The way these people behaved, it sounded like a fortress that had never been cracked until she started asking questions.
I was like, why do you not have a curriculum? 2014 and you don't have an established curriculum? I don't even know if that's legal. Like, how does that operate?
And it's the arrogance of an unchallenged bureaucracy. That is, and sorry to sound maybe regionally biased here, but I can't imagine how many districts and how many states up and down the Northeast corridor probably operate similarly.
Yes, and I don't know how big your district is.
Not exclusively to the Northeast corridor, but you can bet.
But and this wasn't that far from Pennsylvania. Like, this was not, and this story truly did not come into my peripheral, like, it did not come into my, I guess, my vision until recently, but it's been going on for a while, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't know about this.
Well, there's 1,000 stories like hers.
Well, that's true.
I mean, your story, her story are just one of probably thousands.
But I don't know. I really, my heart, I was like, you went from like she said, her gardening out in the yard, that kind of thing, to a senior, like being a fellow with IWF and just being now an advocate for not just her neighbors, not just her community, but a state, like people I'm sure across the country are hearing this and seeing this. Her video, these clips of her talking are getting millions of views.
Well, I mean, Megan Brock, a friend of our show in Pennsylvania, is a very similar woman. She has her children in private school, in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and she's taking on the county.
I was thinking of her too.
Submitting open records requests between the county and the district and the state of Pennsylvania. That's what this takes: is citizen journalists who are just willing to saddle up and go to war with these bureaucracies because the press won't do it, I'm sorry to say.
And I don't think you can do, I really am glad that she brought it up, and I didn't until she did. I don't think you can take any of that on without having a God alongside you. And I am, holy moly, when she was talking about and not realizing what maybe her daughter was needing in terms of education and spiritual growth. What a incredible testament to what we are talking about, that I would guess from what she said, she's new-ish, starting along that path of faith and starting, that's big. It's incredible.
It's as we've talked, as just as our story, as we decided to pursue Christian education for our daughter, it pulled us more deeply into thinking about our own faith. I mean, I think that's what's remarkable about how God moves in these things. It's not just about us putting our child in Christian education, but for a lot of us, it's about recentering our relationship with Christ at the same time. So it's got multiple benefits when you do it.
And just providing that shelter is just, I can't get over that piece of it. That was important.
Well, and sadly not sheltered.
Right.
There's a difference between shelter and sheltered. It's not. I mean, as we've tragically learned this week, there is no such thing as being sheltered from that world that's out there. But it is about trying to give kids the best start possible.
Yes.
And protect their hearts.
As we talk about, just as we talk about things like recent school shooting and in a Christian school, attached to a church, and I almost hate to try to talk about things like that sometimes, because where do you even find the words for what's happening, except to say that there is no safe place with regards to that physical piece of things when you're talking about a shooting. But I believe focusing on God and faith within our education does provide a little bit of a safety around our hearts and our minds.
It's also where the darkest of dark forces will target.
They're going to come after Christianity.
So it's going to be harder, not easier. And I just don't want anybody that listens to us or that is thinking about doing this for themselves or is in this space of Christian education. It would be naive of any of us to assume that we're on some sort of ice flow, safely protected from the world around us. No, quite the opposite.
It's quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite. And so we should always be very aware. You've got some emails before we wrap up.
Yeah, I have one email here that I wanted to just kind of share. It came through last week, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's along this conversation of special education services. And I know you're like, when are we doing this episode? Well, it's hard, and there's some of this subject in here. It's a big subject, and there's a lack of support for sure, but I wanted to keep putting this out there for people that are struggling with this. Good morning. I'm a new listener to the show. I've been enjoying it. I appreciate you bringing light to the private Christian education sector. I listened to the latest podcast over the weekend, and at the end of the conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Barnard, you started to get into special services at private schools. I'm so glad you brought this up. It is definitely something that needs to be addressed, and this is a huge topic for our family. What we have found is that a lot of these schools are able to help kids who are behind, but not kids who are ahead or gifted. We have just settled on private school number 3 for one of our kids, and that finally seems to be working for him. And then she just gives as an example that in preschool at a local Christian school, they learned their child was gifted, although the school couldn't officially say it. He was testing 2 full grades ahead, and the special services teacher there gave us a printed copy of an article on homeschooling your gifted child, and that was it. We were told he couldn't participate in the gifted program at the school until 3rd grade, and after a few years it wasn't working. We were told point blank they didn't have the teachers or the programs to work with him or us. And then throughout the email, there's also references to things like speech programs and things like that. And I think it really does speak to the need of qualified teachers.
Who was that from?
I'm sorry.
First name.
Yes, the first name, that was Amanda out of KCMO.
Amanda in Kansas City. Thank you for the email.
And we
appreciate
the email.
So that goes to the point. It's
big.
not just a matter of when we talk about special needs. It's not just those who are struggling. It's also those who are very advanced.
Right. And I think we were talking about this with some other parents and guests that we've had on, knowing that what was happening in the schools wasn't helping them. I think we actually were talking about it when we were talking about it with our grandmother that we had on a few weeks ago. She was talking about knowing her son needed a little bit more than what the school could do. And, those gifted kids also, they fall between those cracks. And we do have to try to meet kids where they are, but resources are limited in a lot of these private schools. The salaries are already lower. They're operating on a lot less of a budget than a lot of public schools are, and resources are limited. And it's a tough place to be.
Yes, but this would also then lead people to say, well, then that's exactly why public school.
Which is, yes. And I do think if we were wholly honest, special ed services, whether it's gifted, whether it's not, that is a big piece of it, but I don't think you can't do it in a private school. I think you just have to start finding the right people to bring in.
So the admission we would make here is that, one, Christian school is not a panacea. It doesn't answer all the problems or solve all the problems. And you're suggesting that public school may, in fact, be superior for developmentally...
For certain issues and areas. I just think they are funded and they have those resources at times. Do I think those are always the best places? I think some would argue probably that no home is the best situation for that child in that instance.
The problems are not insurmountable.
No. I mean, we've talked about, at school where our daughter is, they are looking to hire, I think, moving into this arena of trying to find people that are qualified for speech, for special services, whether that's to handle students maybe with ADHD or maybe certain things that, that maybe fall along the spectrum. I think they're looking to try because they know it's an area, it's a need that needs to be met. And as we talk about, never have we said there's a perfect scenario for anybody. I think the perfect scenario is making sure that it's approaching your education, schooling with some kind of biblical worldview. I think that's the only perfect piece. But the rest of it, I think it really has to, I think it's going to have to be worked out and addressed. And I am trying to reach people that can speak to this because it's a tough topic with a lot of
hopefully there will
discussion.
Be people listening that can offer their advice. We're still seeking and looking for people who might be able to add some commentary to this topic in particular. If you are someone in the Christian school space and you listen and you think, I have some thoughts or some ideas, or I myself or we ourselves tackle this stuff, we'd love to hear from you.
Especially as we talk about ESAs, scholarships, and things that, you can utilize in different ways. You can always email us, hello@makingtheleap.podcast. That is one way to contact us. And again, we thank you, Amanda, for reaching out. Another way is through Instagram or Facebook at Making the Leap Podcast. And then Twitter is at making_the_leap podcast. And any of those avenues will work. We are reading these emails. taking them under huge consideration.
Yeah.
I really sat with this one for a while because it's something that it's not going unheard by us. But it's big. And like we've said, always, we're not the experts on any of this. We're just parents trying to help offer information.
Thanks for the 5-star reviews and the written reviews at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I hope you'll share this with others if you think it's useful and a helpful resource. We always love to hear from you. And until next week, we'll see you back here.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.